sharing this experience to encourage others to be more careful when being somewhere alone at night, especially at rest areas. This incident occurred not too long ago. This happened in North Carolina while I was traveling with my dad, who's a truck driver. I joined him for a few days on the road to gain some experience because I'm interested in getting my CDL in a few years. We're from Georgia, so the drive to North Carolina wasn't long, and we arrived basically the same day. The delivery was scheduled for early the next morning. Around 12 or 1 a.m., we stopped at a rest area for the night. The parking lot was full of trucks, but the restrooms were completely empty, likely because most drivers were asleep in preparation for early deliveries. As soon as we parked, my dad went straight to sleep. I'm usually a night owl, so I stayed awake. Around 2 a.m., I decided to use the restroom. I also brought my razor with me so I could line up my mustache, assuming no one would be inside at that hour, and that I'd feel free and comfortable taking my time, since I usually only do that at home. When you enter the restroom, there's two sections, one on the left and one on the right. I went to the left side and noticed a man standing near the urinal. He was very tall, at least around 6'4". I didn't think much of it and went into a stall to use the bathroom. Afterward, I washed my hands and noticed that he was still standing there. Just as I was about to leave, he unzipped his pants and began using the urinal. I felt uncomfortable, but I didn't think much of it at the time still. To make it seem like I had left, I went to the right side of the restroom instead. I stood in front of the mirror to line up my mustache. However, around 10 seconds later, the same man entered that side of the restroom. This immediately raised concern. He had already been on the other side, so there was no clear reason for him to follow me. He started walking toward me, and as soon as I took out my razor, he suddenly stopped directly behind me. He looked shocked, almost as if something hadn't gone the way he expected. At that point, I felt genuinely uneasy. I continued lining up my mustache as quickly, considering I'm 5'9", and he looks like he was in his late 30s or 40s. I knew he could easily overpower me. I exited the restroom and noticed security cameras near the entrance, which gave me some relief. The man did not follow me, thank God. I was flooded with relief. I turned to the truck where my dad was still asleep, along with all the other drivers in the lot. I told a friend what happened, and about 20 minutes later, he replied. He suggested I go back to the restroom on FaceTime with him, which I did for some reason. However, the man was gone. I explained everything in detail and showed my friend where the guy had stood and been before. Then I left the restroom about 5 minutes later and ended the call since he had to go. As I stepped outside again, I noticed a separate parking lot behind the rest area for passenger vehicles. One red car had its headlights on and was the only car illuminated. When I turned to look at it, the headlights immediately shut off. I couldn't see who was inside due to the darkness and distance. I don't know if the driver just got there and was parking, leaving, or possibly even the same man from earlier, but the timing unsettled me. I went back to the truck where my dad was still asleep. Nothing else happened that night. I returned to my normal life. However, I never told my dad about the incident because he's very strict and had only recently started letting me go outside alone. I was 17 at the time, and I knew telling him would likely result in him not letting me go outside alone again until I turned 18, which then I would be independent and can go wherever. The only person I told about this was my friend. Afterward, I tried to rationalize what happened. The man didn't appear homeless or on drugs, but the way he was acting was far from normal. He had clean clothes and a well-kept beard, so I doubt he was homeless or a crackhead. Still, what continues to bother me is what he was planning and why he acted the way he did, and what will creep me out forever about that night is what would have happened if I hadn't had my razor with me. Since that incident, I've become much more careful about my surroundings, even during the day. I'm a woman in my early 20s, and I've lived in New York City my whole life, so navigating the MTA at any time of day or night is second nature to me. For context, my one-way commute from the city to home is about 2 hours each way, involving 2 trains, a 30-minute bus ride, and then a dimly lit 5-block walk home. After doing it for so many years, I usually don't think twice about it, but there are 2 nights I still replay in my head all the time. The first instance happened on the train. I had just stepped on right before the doors closed, so I stayed standing near them. I had headphones in, but I could faintly hear a homeless man saying something at me. At first, I ignored it, assuming he was talking to himself, but he kept staring directly at me. So I took out one earbud and asked what he said. That's when I clearly heard him angrily insult me and call me a bitch. My heart instantly started pounding. I still remember how hot my ears and face felt. It was like all the blood rushed straight to my skin. I started trying to make eye contact with other passengers, silently hoping someone else would acknowledge what was happening, but nobody would hold my gaze for more than a second. Everyone just looked away. At the next stop, even though it wasn't my stop, I got off and quickly moved into the next car over, desperately hoping the man wouldn't come out and notice where I went. The unsettling part is that this honestly isn't even unusual while commuting in New York. Most of the time you just keep your head down and try not to engage with whoever the aggressor is. Still, I kept glancing through the train windows, waiting to see if he followed me. 2 stops later, I finally saw him step off the train. I didn't even realize I'd been holding my breath until the doors closed behind him. The second instance happened when I was in grad school. I had night classes that ended around 8:30 p.m., so by the time I caught the bus home, it would usually be well after 10. Late night bus rides always feel different, quieter, and more unpredictable. Usually the drivers only stop if someone pulls the string or requests it. That night, I was listening to horror stories during my commute, and the specific story I was listening to was about a woman being followed. So when I got off the bus, I remember lowering the volume and becoming extra aware of my surroundings. The final part of my commute requires me to walk past a couple of stores before turning down a dark residential dead-end street with terrible lighting. One of the stores I pass is a Popeyes. I remember debating whether or not I wanted mac and cheese, but I had already passed the store and was almost at the end of the block before deciding to turn around and go back. That's when I noticed the man from the bus. Up until that moment, I hadn't paid attention to him at all, but the second I changed direction, he literally stopped walking, like he froze. Then he just stared at me wide-eyed. It immediately made me uneasy, but I tried to brush it off and went into Popeyes anyway. They barely had anything left because it was so late, so after a minute, I left and continued heading home. It wasn't until I was halfway down the block that I noticed him again. He was standing right at the entrance of the dark street I had to turn down. He was just standing there, waiting. At that point, my pace slowed immediately, and I called my brother. He's usually never home, so the fact that he answered honestly felt like a miracle. I think he could hear something was wrong from my voice alone, because the second I told him I was by Popeyes, he immediately said he was coming to meet me. Knowing my brother was on the way, I finally turned down the dark street and passed the man, and then I heard footsteps behind me. The man had started walking too. He stayed behind me, matching my pace, and then he quietly told me that he loved me before mumbling other things that I couldn't understand. At that point, I decided it was safer to stay somewhere with light, so I walked back to the store area and waited outside a liquor store nearby. Since I live in the neighborhood, I recognized a lot of the men who usually hung around there, and I remember scanning the area hoping to spot a familiar face. But that night, I didn't recognize anyone. That's when the man approached me. He repeatedly asked if I needed help and insisted that he could help me while slowly moving closer. I said no loudly more than once, and honestly, if he genuinely thought I was lost and wanted to help, that would be one thing, but I was clearly saying no over and over, and he just kept advancing toward me anyway. Then I noticed he was wearing latex gloves. This was post-COVID, so my immediate thought was that if he was that cautious, why wasn't he wearing a face mask too? And it wasn't even cold outside, so the gloves looked completely out of place. Then he started repeatedly telling me that I needed to go home, almost like he was trying to pressure me into walking past him again. A few seconds later, he walked into the liquor store, and the second I saw him move further inside, I turned the corner where my brother was finally walking toward me. The entire situation probably lasted 5 minutes at most, but it felt so much longer than that. That's the strange thing about moments like these. They happen fast afterward when you replay them in your head, but while you're living through them, time barely moves. The story I'm about to tell is truly one of the most terrifying things that has ever happened to me, and is a prime example of how a great night can quickly turn into a real-life nightmare. These events took place a couple of years ago when I was 19. Now I'm almost 26. I saw a group of 4, maybe 5 people in the distance. They were probably 200 yards away from me. As soon as they saw me, all of them started running toward my direction. I was taken aback by this. I asked myself why on earth someone would do that just by seeing a random person on the street. My instincts kicked in and told me to run this time. My house was right between my position and theirs, but luckily much closer to me than the group of people who were now shouting some unintelligible things. I got to my front door, and just as I was trying to unlock it, my keys fell on the ground like in a fucking movie. I picked them up, but before turning the key, I decided to have a final glance at those men. All of them were homeless looking with dirty, ripped clothes. Seeing this, I knew I did the right thing to run. Finally, I got into my house, then closed and locked the door as fast as I could. I was breathing so heavily, and all kinds of thoughts were going through my mind. For example, that they were going to break in any second now, and that my parents were not at home, meaning I was all alone. I stayed and listened next to the door in complete darkness for what felt like an eternity, but it was probably a couple of minutes. Nothing happened. Everything was silent outside. This was somewhat reassuring, but very weird at the same time. Deep down, I knew the danger had not passed yet, and most likely the attackers were still out there. After a minute or so, I slowly got up and went to look through the window. There was no one. I went to the other window near the kitchen, and yet again couldn't see anyone. Just an empty street with the wind blowing the tree branches. Still, I decided it would be better to dial 112 and report all the strange things which happened that night. I explained everything to the lady on the phone, including the screams I heard earlier. To be honest, she wasn't so helpful at first. For some reason, she kept asking me multiple times if I knew the people who ran after me, and since I wasn't harmed, they pretty much can't do anything. At the end, she said she'll send a police car to patrol the area, and that they'll keep me updated if they see anything suspicious. I thanked her and got off the phone. Maybe 15 or 20 minutes later, I saw a police car moving slowly through the neighborhood and passing my house. This was when I decided it was time to get some sleep, simply because I was so exhausted. It was way past midnight at that point. The next morning, I tried my best not to think of the events from last night, but there were so many questions in my head that still remained unanswered. My best friend called and said our other friend is feeling sick, so he won't be coming today. So it was just me and him hanging out at my house all day. Before him leaving, I decided to briefly mention yesterday's story without much details so I didn't get him worried. We joked about it, but at the same time, I saw he was genuinely concerned about me. My parents called too and asked if everything was okay. I said yes, since I knew how easily my mom gets worried. I was going to tell them, but I wanted to do it after they arrived back home. And I never got an update from the police either. To this day, I have no idea what could have caused those people to chase after me. Who was that screaming man, and why was he in such distress? Was he an actual victim of the lunatics, or was this some sort of sick strategy by them to lure people closer? Chase after the potential target, then rob them, or even worse? Lastly, was the sound I heard on the second night connected to all this? Or was it just my mind playing tricks on me? I've asked myself the same questions a million times, but I guess I'll never be certain enough to know the truth.